So there's my spoiler alert. But how. But I was presently, and her name is, and it definitely reminds me a ton of Every Summer After. No, this actually is Every Summer After. Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse, and welcome to my year-end best of favorites, all the fun stuff video series. So I am gonna do 4 different videos this year, and normally I wait till December 31st. I count my reading from January 1 to December 31, and then I pick all of my favorites, but I've decided to break it up into a couple different categories this year. So we still have 2 weeks left in the year. I am still saving my final best of list until the 31st because I'm always hoping that I'm going to find a new favorite. But what we are going to do today is we are going to talk about my favorite debuts that I read in 2022. So not all of these books have been published in 2022. Some of them have. I made a list with dates, so I'll let you guys know. But I wanted to talk about some of my favorite debuts from the year that I read. So it's kind of self-explanatory. So I did do a favorite debut video recently, but that wasn't just books I read this year. And what I'm trying to do, so full disclosure, I have read more books this year than I have ever. So the time of filming this, I've read 115 books, which I don't even know how that happened, except I think my obsession with audiobooks helped that happen. But there are so many books, and there's so many books that I loved this year that I want to talk about. So we are going to do my favorite debuts. We're going to do my favorite rereads. We're going to do my favorite new to me authors. And then we're going to do my favorites of the year. And we're also going to try and keep this earring in the right direction because it's being difficult. So there will be a few crossovers from the first 3 lists onto my favorites of the year, but I'm going to try and minimize that so I'm not just talking about the same stuff over and over. But that was enough exposition about what we're talking about today. Let's just get into the favorite debuts that I read in 2022. Basically in no particular order. So the first book I want to talk about is one of the first books I read this year, and it's The Appeal by Janice Hallett. So this was a 2021 UK release, but a 2022 US release. So I had heard some buzz about it, and I had actually reached out to Atria and asked them for an ARC of it, and they sent it to me, which was very cool. And this book really was just such great fun, and it made Janice Hallett one of those authors that I am instantly interested in. So this book is told in an epistolary style. It's all emails and text messages, and that in and of itself like completely grabbed my attention. So this book opens with 2 young lawyers who are sorting through documents for a case that happened, and it was a murder trial, and we are preparing for the appeal. So they are sorting through all of the information. They are new to the case, so we are discovering the information alongside them, so we get that armchair detective vibe of it all. And the blurb on this is, it says, 1 person is dead, 1 person is in jail, and 1 person is unsure they've apprehended the real killer. So this one follows this small town, and we get this amateur theater group, which is what connects everyone from this town together. So this is one of those books where I feel like you are best served going into it blind, but as I say, it revolves around this amateur theater group which brings these people together. So the leaders of the group, their granddaughter is ill, and this is about the community rallying together to raise money to help funding so that she can get medical treatment. And there's just some things that aren't quite right about this group. So I really enjoyed this. It was so fast-paced in that, again, you are reading emails, you are reading letters, you are reading the text messages, and we get inserts from the lawyers as they are going through it, trying to figure out what's going on. And there's literally parts where the lawyers will be like, what the heck is going on here? So I absolutely loved it. I love the structure of this book. Huge fan. Loved it. The next book I have is one I read back in February, and it's The Maid by Nita Prose. I loved everything about this book. And I know that this book has shown up on a ton of best of the year lists, and I totally understand why, because I think it was fun. I think it was heartfelt. I loved the mystery vibe to it. And we are getting what reminded me of Eleanor Oliphant in a murder cozy mystery set in, it doesn't even tell you what city. In my mind, we're in New York City, but it keeps that part vague. And I thoroughly enjoyed this book. So our main character in this, Molly, is a maid in this small boutique hotel. And she winds up discovering a dead body in one of the rooms that she is cleaning. And because she was there, she instantly becomes a person of interest for the police. And it is about her trying to solve the mystery, the police coming to her. It's everyone that she's working with at this hotel. Molly's grandmother, who raised her, passed away a few months ago, and Molly is really trying to navigate some new territory here and is feeling a bit untethered. And she has the warmest of hearts and the best of intentions. And sometimes people take advantage of that, but also sometimes people underestimate her. And I just really enjoyed this book. So, not a thriller, and I feel like some people, this is one of those books that maybe expectations were not in the right place because of how it was pitched. This is definitely cozy mystery to me. There's some great humor to this. There's some great emotional weight to this book. It definitely talks about grief because, as I say, she's dealing with her grandmother's passing. And I just thought it was really well done. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'm a huge fan, so I look forward to seeing what else Nita Prose does, but definitely a great debut, and like I say, huge fan of it, and I'm a huge fan of Molly. Just loved it so much. I am going to try and avoid saying I loved it so much because I feel like that's obvious. That's why it's on the list. So the next book I have is probably one of my favorites of the year, and I'm always hard-pressed to pick a favorite, but Shiver by Ali Reynolds, you guys. This was a 2021 debut, and I was obsessed. And this was one of those books where I read it early in this year. I read it in January of 2022 and was kicking myself like, why didn't I read it sooner? But again, if you've been here for a while, you know I'm a firm believer that books find you when they're supposed to. This book was so good. So this is fully inspired by And Then There Were None. It is an isolated mystery with past and present timelines, and it has so many of my favorite tropes. So the isolated And Then There Were None. We get friends to frenemies. We have a mystery in the past and a mystery in the present. So this story is about a group of snowboarders who basically are Olympic hopefuls, the best of the best, top of their game, and they all are training together at the same place in the French Alps. There were so many books that came out at the same time that were French and Swiss Alps, so I want to make sure I get it right. So training together in the French Alps. So that was 10 years ago, and one person from their group wound up going missing at the end of that season. So everyone is back together again under the guise of remembering the 10th anniversary of the person from their group who went missing. But of course, as it turns out, they are there under false pretenses. They are brought back to the mountain that they were training on back then, and they realize very quickly they are all alone. They are cut off from all communication, and they are in danger because somebody is out for some revenge. So I just can't rave enough about this book. I was hooked from the get-go. I compulsively read it. I thought these characters were so well drawn. The relationships in the past and in the present, kind of seeing how these people went from being the best of friends to this fractured group, and then are sort of forced to have to come together again to basically survive the night in a lot of ways. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. This book does have an element of romance in it, which is not something I need in a book, and is definitely not something I gravitate to in a thriller, but it worked so well. I thought it was so well done in this book. I was invested in the relationships. I was invested in these characters. And then Ali Reynolds herself is a snowboarder. I don't know diddly about snowboarding. I have never felt so into the story. Like you are strapped into the snowboard, you are doing the flips, you are dealing with the bruises, you are dealing with the pain. The athletic requirements to do what these people do is absolutely stunning to me. The daredevil tricks and flips that they do, the risks that they take. I was so interested in that side of it, which is something I never would have said going into the book. I just thought it was just knocked it out of the ballpark. I think she did a stellar, stellar job on this book, and I am obsessed. It is obviously wintry, snowy. If you're looking for a great winter read, this is a great one to pick up. So I do have her second book, which I haven't read yet, so stay tuned for that. But I just thought this was spectacular. Like, this to me is like debut writing goals. Just loved everything about it. Loved it. I just said it again. I said I wasn't going to say it, but I'm going to keep saying it. Next up is a 2022 release, and this is The Night She Went Missing by Kristen Bird. So this is one that I did talk about in that Debuts I Love video, and there's a reason why I love this book. So this is more domestic thriller, domestic suspense, and this one gives me another one of the tropes that I love, where we have sort of this rich people behaving badly-ish in this small town, and we get the dynamic not only between the children, but also between the mothers. So the premise of this book is we have a girl named Emily. She's popular but bookish. She is a senior at the local prep school, and she goes missing after a night out with her friends. She was last seen leaving a party with Alex, a football player with a dubious reputation, but none of the friends are talking. So we get this dynamic between Emily's mother, Alex's mother, and then another mother from the group. And as I say, we see how the relationships between the women starts to fracture. We get to see the dynamic between the kids, this kid Alex who was accused of having done something. Why are they closing ranks? Why are they not talking? So it's about these mothers having to sort of confront the reality of maybe what their children are up to or who their children are, and everybody thinks they know who's responsible and everybody thinks they know what's happening. And then of course at the same time we have these moms who are trying to protect their own secrets and their own reputations. So we get that sort of secrets and lies, and again there's sort of this affluent culture that's going on. This takes place in Texas, and I really just enjoyed it. And I just love that like friend to frenemies vibe of it. And I thought it was really well done. I did not see the resolution coming. I did not figure this one out. And I just had a great time with it. So very, very big fan of this one. And it says the lies they tell can be deadly. I'm also just a huge fan of this cover. I love it. Stunning. Another recent read of mine and a 2022 release is The Resemblance by Lauren Nosset. So this one I had a field day tabbing up because I loved it so much. And this one really took me by surprise in that I feel like she really did a very smart turn on a thriller and kind of set an expectation, but then did something I never saw coming. And I can't talk about it without talking about it. You know what I mean? I was pleasantly surprised by things that happened in this book that I never in a million years saw coming. And I just thought it was so smart the way she did things. This is so terrible. You can't talk about thrillers. You can't talk about thrillers. So this book is set at the University of Georgia, and we are following a police detective, and her name is... So we are following Marlette Kaplan. So her mom is a professor at the University of Georgia, and when the book opens, she is visiting her mom at her office, and when she leaves, she is the first on the scene of a hit and run that takes place on campus. So super popular frat boy crossing the street, head down, and a car hits him and kills him and keeps on going. So there's plenty of witnesses. Everyone agrees this car did not slow down. And then the creep factor is everyone also agrees that the driver of the car looked like the kid that he killed, and also the driver was smiling when he did it. So what is going on here? So Marlette is committed to being assigned to this case. She is dealing with some issues in the police department, being one of the only women. It's a very young police department. So she is, I want to say she's 29, her partner's like 32. So she's dealing with the dynamics of the police force. And then she becomes very obsessed with this case and figuring it out. So we get great college life. We get great Greek life. It's very much the dark side of Greek life. As someone who was a part of Greek life, nothing that was portrayed in this book bothered me. And sadly, some things portrayed in this book were very familiar to me. So I think it's a great representation of what college life and Greek life are like. And once again, kind of similar to the Kristen Bird book, we get this group of friends, these fraternity brothers, sororities that they hang out with, people closing ranks, not talking. And I loved it. So Marlette is one of those characters where she is very driven. She becomes very obsessed with this case, and she is just not hearing anything else that's going on around her, and she's going to figure this out, like, regardless of what it takes. So I thought this was very, very well done. The atmosphere in this book is so spot on. I have never been to the University of Georgia, but man, did I feel like I was on this campus. And I just think she did such a great job with these characters. They are complicated. There's so much going on. There is, of course, like an element of mystery about people's backgrounds. And it really just surprised me in all the best ways. So I am so glad I picked this one up. This was one of those books that I missed on my radar when it came out. And when I heard about it, like instantly went out, bought it, and then read it. And I'm so glad that I did. So read this in November, really, really great book, and highly recommend it. Dark academia vibes, and like I say, that Greek life vibe with police procedural on top, so great. Another book with that dark academia vibe is Tell Me Everything by Cambria Brockman. So this came out in 2019, and this is a book that definitely reminded me of In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead, in that we get this group of friends at a college campus and we get some past and present mystery, and we get to see the evolution of this friendship from freshman year to senior year. So this book is set up in Maine at Hawthorne College, which is fictional. And it opens on January 29th, 2011, which is senior day. And this is when all the seniors basically jump into the water, which is like freezing cold, but it's a ritual. So in the opening chapter, we find out that this group of friends who met freshman year start the day together, but they will not all be there by the end of the day. And then we go forwards and backwards in timelines. So this is a group of co-ed friends. Our main character is Malin. And we see from the start how this friendship group meets, how it evolves, the dynamics between the group, and I just loved it so much. And I love these books where you know at the beginning that like somebody doesn't make it, but you don't know who, and as you're going through the book, you're like, is it you? Is it you? Is it you? And it's like, did you do it? Did you do it? Did you do it? So I love those questions, and I love that kind of storytelling. This is definitely a slow burn, and this book definitely left a mark on me, and I was thinking so much about it afterwards. And I know it came out in 2019, so I may have just totally missed the boat on it, but I feel like this is one of those books that I don't hear people talking about enough, and I just thought it was so smart. And it was compared to The Secret History, which is of course why I picked it up. And I think it's because of that like elite New England prep school vibe that it has going on in it. But I thought these were such interesting characters. I mean, you can see I dog-eared it a lot. But I definitely recommend this one. And again, it's slow burn. It's definitely dark and messed up people doing dark and messed up things. And just in such, again, sort of like an interesting way. Like I feel like it's familiar territory with the dark academia and the friend group, but I also feel like it's something I haven't read before, which I love. So nothing predictable about it. Things I didn't figure out. I, of course, had theories. I love when I'm wrong. But I don't, like I say, I feel like this book doesn't get enough chatterboxing, so definitely was one of my favorites of the year. The next book I have is The Sunday Girl by Pip Drysdale. So I had actually heard about this on a podcast. This was a 2019 UK release, and it just came out in the US, I want to say maybe in 2021, but she has 4 books. One of them might be forthcoming. So she's definitely an author I want to dig more into, but this is a revenge story, which I love. So this is definitely another one of those books where I feel like you're best served going into it blind. So I'm just going to read a snippet of the back of the book. So it says, Taylor Bishop is hurt, angry, and wants to destroy Angus Hollingsworth in the way he destroyed her. She's got nothing left to lose, so why not shatter his property, his reputation, and his life? So she definitely makes some choices. She definitely makes some choices. This is one of those books, again, go into it blind, go into it blind. If you love delicious revenge, dark and messed up people doing dark and messed up things, I feel like this is one of those epitome books of that. This has it. These are people who are, I feel like, simultaneously unlikable, but also rooting for some people, and also the lengths that people will go to destroy each other. Very messed up. So I am definitely Team Taylor. I was totally rooting for her, and I loved this. I actually listened to the audiobook of this, and I just gobbled it up completely. I feel like there's like a revenge fantasy somewhere in this book as well, and I just thought it was such a great time. So I had never heard of this before. I definitely need to read more Pip Drysdale, but if you are looking for kind of like a quick, compulsive read or listen, I don't think you can go wrong with this book, and it was just delicious. It was absolutely delicious. In a complete 180 from the dark and messed upness, we have Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. So if you guys, again, have been here and following me on this journey, you know the reason I picked up this book, which was not at all on my radar, was because I was listening to a podcast with Ashley Winstead, and she was talking about her next thriller, which comes out in 2023, and she said it was Every Summer After with serial killers. So I, of course, assumed it was a thriller she was referring to, and when I Googled it and saw what it was, I was like, what is she talking about? And I've said it before, I'll say it again, I will do anything Ashley Winstead tells me to do. So I went out and bought this book, and I loved it. Like, we are talking, like, I laughed, I cried, it was better than Cats. I loved everything about this book. This book reminds me a ton of Love in Other Words by Christina Lauren, which was one of my favorite books back when I read it. So in this one, we are getting that dual timeline. We are getting a relationship that develops over a course of summers in this book, hence the title of the book. So in this book, we are following a woman named Persephone, and when she was a teenager, her family is from Toronto, and her parents got a house out by the lake for the summer. And the first morning she gets there, they wind up meeting the neighbors, who is this woman, Sue, who is a single mom raising 2 boys, Charlie and Sam. So Sam is Persephone's age, Charlie's a couple years older. And this book is told over the course of 6 summers and 1 weekend. So when the book opens, Persephone gets a call from Charlie telling her that his mom, Sue, has passed away, and he thinks that she would want to be there for the funeral. So Persephone has not been back to the lake in 10 years. She has not talked to Sam or Charlie or Sue or anyone in those 10 years. And of course she wants to go back to honor Sue, but it also requires her to confront what happened all those years ago. So we see the evolution of the relationship, and I just thought it was so well done. I really enjoyed both the timelines. I thought it was relatable in so many different ways. I loved how we see them in the present day trying to sort of get, like, it's that thing where, like, you're so familiar, you know each other so well, but you also haven't seen each other in so long that it's awkward. And I thought the story was just absolutely well done. So I'm a huge fan of this. And again, I feel like it was very realistic in terms of real people who make choices and have to live with their choices, and people make mistakes and people are messy, and it's just a confusing time when you're a teenager. And I feel like dealing with everything that was going on with the long distance of their relationship, and then seeing them as they've grown into adults. And I just loved it. I just loved it so much. I did not see my love of this book coming, but man, I mean, I was like tears, like weeping, wet in the face, heaving tears. And I just thought it was so great. I just thought it was absolutely great. So a huge fan. I can't wait to read her next book. And I can't wait to see how Ashley Winstead is going to turn this into something with serial killers. So I'm very excited. Okay, so back to the thrillers, because of course. The next one I have is Jackal by Erin E. Adams. So I just read this in November, and I really loved this book. And this book was so creepy. There were definitely moments where I was having a little gag effect. Only a couple. And it really was kind of messing with, like, what is going on here. This is one of those books where I feel like it's very trust no one. It was pitched as similar to the movie Get Out, which I understand that comparison. And I really just wasn't sure where this book was going to take me, and I was totally down for the ride. So in this book, we are following a woman named Liz Roche, and she is from this small town, Jonestown, Pennsylvania, and she is coming back for her best friend's wedding. So Liz is not totally jazzed about going back to this town because she doesn't have the best memories of being there. So it's a predominantly white town. She was one of only 2 black girls in her high school, and she's just not jazzed about the reunion factor of all these people that she used to go to school with. So we come back, she is at the wedding. So her best friend has been dating her about-to-be husband for quite a long time. They have a child together. And the night of the wedding, their daughter goes missing. And Liz goes to look for her along with everyone else. And all Liz finds is a piece of her dress covered in blood in the woods. So this town has a history of girls going missing. So when Liz was in high school, this girl Keisha that she was friends with, they were all out partying in the woods, which who else did that in high school? And Keisha had walked off with a guy, and then the next time she was found, she was very, very dead, and her heart was ripped out. And the case was never solved, kind of swept under the rug. And the more Liz starts to look into what happened to Caroline, who is her goddaughter, her best friend's daughter, she's starting to learn some very dark secrets that this town is harboring. So we get multiple points of view in this. There is definitely a creep factor. And again, a couple scenes that definitely made me gag, but it's not overly violent and graphic, I didn't think. I don't have the highest threshold for, I don't have any threshold really for body horror stuff. So there were a couple descriptions that were a little gag worthy, but overall it was more of, I feel like, a spooky atmospheric book. It definitely is that, like, trust no one vibe to it. I feel like The scares in this are something I can't articulate without giving stuff away, but I definitely walked away from this book feeling a certain kind of terror, which I feel like if you've read it, maybe you know what I mean. But I really think it was well done. The writing was great. There are some chapters which there's like a right justification on the page, so there's a uniqueness to the storytelling here. So like here's one, like you can see it's all right justified. But I found it a really interesting book. We get a little bit of like newspaper clippings in here from the past. So there's mysteries in the past, mysteries in the present. And I very much enjoyed it. I really enjoyed Liz. I enjoyed being on the journey with her as she was uncovering kind of these horrible secrets. And I thought it was really well done. So once again, can't wait to see what Erin Adams does next, and would highly recommend this book. And another one with a stunning cover. The next book I have is a 2021 debut, and it's Hello Transcriber by Hannah Morrissey. So this is another one I read recently, so you guys have heard me talk a ton about it because I also read her newest book, The Widowmaker, and loved it. But this was such a great introduction to Hannah Morrissey as a writer. She definitely gives me some Jennifer Hillier vibes in her darkness, in messy people, in the dark and messed up, people doing dark and messed up things. She doesn't shy away from some ugliness. She doesn't shy away from the darkness, which I love. It just like warms my dark little heart. But this book follows a transcriber for the police force named Hazel, and Hannah Morrissey herself was a police transcriber. So the authenticity factor to this is, of course, off the charts. And I love this as, you know, always trying to find in books sort of your outsider who gets involved in a police investigation. I don't know that I've ever read one where there was a police transcriber, and honestly didn't even know what a police transcriber was until this book came about. So Hazel is working the overnight shift, and she literally transcribes the notes from the cops as they are recounting crime scenes. They do bench warrants, they process arrests, and she is literally like alone in a room at night. Kind of dark and creepy, and she is hearing sort of the darkest, worst secrets of the town that she lives in. And this town of Black Harbor is very dark. It is very messed up, and I loved it. So you definitely get the atmospheric vibes in this one too. The cold, the desolation, and sort of the desperation of some of our characters. So Hazel's got her own stuff going on. And she gets this job when the book opens, and she instantly learns some very dark secrets about this town, including the fact that her neighbor has confessed to dumping a dead body in a dumpster. And she becomes very engrossed in this case, and she winds up working with kind of this rogue cop on figuring it out. And I loved it. This is one of those books that is not huge in size and packs so much. Like, I feel like this book was twice as long as it was in a good way, because so much happens in here. And once again, I feel like no word is wasted. It is very page-turny. It's 296 pages, including the acknowledgments. And we get so much character, so much atmosphere, so much action, not in the sense of like chase scenes, but like so much happens, but yet it is done so tightly and so beautifully. Her writing is gorgeous. I'm just such a huge fan of her as a writer. And again, the authenticity that she brings to the page here, having been the police transcriber and then having her character do that job, I also think was just completely fascinating. So I'm a huge fan. The Widowmaker, just a sidebar, also takes place in Black Harbor. So Black Harbor is the anchor for the series. You can read them in either order, but as someone who read them in publishing order, I do think there's a little bit more of a fun factor because you do get character crossover, which is always a little bit more fun when you are following the Easter eggs along the way. And it's something that I didn't do with the next author I'm going to talk about. But as I was reading her books and saw how she planted Easter eggs along all of her books, because they take place in the same universe, I just love that. So huge fan of Hannah Morrissey. Already, like, if I could pre-order her book that isn't ready for pre-order yet, I would, but she's got a new book coming out in 2023 and I'm gonna be all over it. So the next book I have was a 2011 debut. You guys already know who it's gonna be, an author I know and love, and it's Creep by Jennifer Hillier. So I am obsessed with Jennifer Hillier. I had read Jar of Hearts a couple years ago and was off the charts obsessed, and then did not do the thing where I read all her books immediately, but I have since rectified that, and I have now read all of her books, and I just love her so much. So she does set all of her books in the same universe in Seattle, which I love. You don't have to read them in any particular order, but what was fun, I read them totally out of order, but as I was starting to read the different books and saw different characters popping up in different books, the same coffee shops, references to the same fictional college, references to some past cases and things that happen in this universe, I just loved it. I just love when authors do things like that. It's just fun for the reader, I think. But this was her debut novel, and I will still, if you guys have seen my Jennifer Hillier video that I made, my dedicated author obsession video I made on her, I will stand by the fact that Jar of Hearts is still my favorite of her books. I do think it is still her darkest book, but I also think everything wonderfully dark and messed up about Jennifer Hillier and her characters and her writing is here from the beginning, and I loved it. I was almost shocked because I feel like a lot of authors, when you read all of their books and you read them in pub order, you see like not how their writing changes necessarily, but sometimes authors will take more risks the more they get into their career. And not that they play it safe necessarily out of the gate, but some authors I think do. But I feel like Jennifer Hillier came out swinging on the page. This is who I am. This is what I write. This is what I want to talk about. And I loved it. Like I was surprised how dark it was from the start in the best way possible. So in this one, we are following a psych professor named Dr. Sheila Tao. And she has been having a bit of an affair with her teaching assistant. And she also was engaged. And when the book opens, she has broken off her affair. She is committed fully to her fiance, but her teaching assistant is not really okay with that. And he's not really jazzed about getting dumped. So it says if he can't have her, no one can. So also on campus, she is a professor at the local college. A star student is stabbed to death, and we have a mystery of what is going on with the murders on campus, and then we have Ethan, who is the teaching assistant, basically trying to ruin Sheila's life. So this book was such a compulsive read. It was extremely wonderfully dark and messed up, and I was a huge fan of it. I was a huge fan of Sheila. I was a huge fan of Ethan. It definitely goes to some very dark places. And I was fully invested in this. I, again, was just stunned with how on the page Jennifer Hillier was from page one. And having followed her career for a while now and seeing different interviews with her and seeing her on panels at Thriller Fest, one of the panels I had attended, she was talking about, it was one of those like, you know, telling stories of your career. And she was saying how when she had workshopped this book, people had said like no one's going to want to read about this and to scale it back, and she made changes and she took things out to like kind of give it some more mass appeal and tone some stuff down, and the book wasn't selling, you know, she couldn't get a publisher from it, and then she went back to her original concept and eventually it sold. So I feel like there's a real story in there about being true to the story you want to tell, and I just thought it was great. And I thought it was really interesting for her to like how hard it was for people to hear, like nobody wants to read about what you're writing about, but she was so committed to telling this story, and she eventually told that story, and I just think she's amazing. So if you're not reading her, you need to be reading her. My only nugget is even if you're not reading her in order, totally fine, but read Creep and then read Freak, which is her second book, because there is crossover characters and there is connection to it. And those books to me are kind of a duology. So read those in order, but otherwise you can start anywhere, but why not start at the beginning? And my last book, which should surprise no one, which is definitely one of my favorites, is A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham. So this was a 2022 January release, and I loved everything about this book. We get past and present timelines, we get mysteries in the past and mysteries in the present, we get a serial killer, and I love it. So in this one, we are following a girl named Chloe, and when she was 12, 6 teenage girls went missing, and eventually her father confessed to being the one who kidnapped them and took them. So that's great. And he went to jail. And then we fast forward to present day, and Chloe is engaged and she has her own practice and she has moved on with her life. But then a girl goes missing, and it's very similar to what was happening back when she was 12, and she starts to look into both the past and present mysteries and her connection to both of them. So I really enjoyed this book. This was definitely something where I was trying to figure it out and I couldn't figure stuff out. I loved the writing. I read this very, very quickly over the course of a couple of days, and I was just obsessed. I was absolutely obsessed with this book. I love her characters. I love her writing. I think she tells such a great story. As of the filming of this, I have not yet read All the Dangerous Things, which is All Those Dangerous Things, All the Dangerous Things. If I ever get this title right. All the Dangerous Things, her book that comes out in January of 2023, so stay tuned for that. But auto by author, completely obsessed with her as a writer. She does great atmosphere, she does great character, she does great mystery thriller, and I am hooked on her as a writer, and I'm obsessed with this book. So I have a hard time picking a favorite, but if I had to, this would definitely be like a contender. So that's going to do it for my favorite debuts that I read in 2022. I was like debating just like narrowing it down to only books that came out in 2022, but I couldn't not talk about some of these books that I just discovered. So such a great reading year, so many great authors. For the ones that did debut this year, I cannot wait to dive into their new books. And I am definitely behind the 8 ball and diving into a couple books. Allie Reynolds. And I'm just very excited for just more from these authors and to dig more into them. So let me know if you had a favorite debut of the year, whether or not it came out in 2022, if you had a favorite from this list, or maybe something on this list that has piqued your interest. That's always fun too. But I am going to continue with the content of my best of for the year, so stay tuned for all of that. And thank you guys so much for being here today and for supporting me throughout this year and beyond, if you guys have been here for a while. And if you're new here, welcome. What a great way to meet all of you guys as I talk about some of my favorite things. And I will be back with more favorite things in another video really soon. So until then, you guys, take care. Bye.